Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon for the Nature of Spring with the Mass Audubon. Springtime in Massachusetts is filled with unique seasonal wonders and mysteries. What animals are making noises in the evenings and why? Who is migrating back or waking from their winter slumbers? What kind of wildflowers are popping up near the sidewalks and woodland trails? This online program will introduce the seasonal dynamics of the nature in spring and provide ideas and resources for observing, appreciating, and supporting wildlife near home during this season. And it's led by Tia Pinney, who's a biologist, the lead naturalist, and the educator at Mass Audubon's Drumlin Farm Wildlife Sanctuary in Lincoln. Since 1994, when she first started working at the farm, Tia has overseen efforts to maintain New England's wildlife on the 206-acre property, managing staff and volunteers in both planting projects and citizen science. And I now have those libraries in front of me. I want to thank the libraries in Amherst, West Newbury, Groton, Greenfield, Nashua, and Northampton for helping promote this afternoon's program. It's a very large coalition. I don't typically get that, so that's great to see. All right, so all 100 plus of us, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Tia for joining us this afternoon. And Tia, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robert. And here we go, folks. So as Robert said, if you've got questions, put them in the Q&A, and we will get to as many as we can at the end. So I may cruise through a few slides just to make sure we get some time for questions, because questions are always good. And I do have to say we're already, a month into true spring, and so things have moved along. And we'll talk about some stuff that already maybe old hat, but we need to cover it in order to truly understand spring as it evolves across our seasons. So off we go. This is a black-capped chickadee pulling out some fluff from a fiddlehead to go put in its nest. So today our agenda is we got to do a little science. So, science is not too scary. I hope I don't scare anybody off with the word science. I love science myself, but I know in school it wasn't always our favorite subject. And then we'll talk about cycles and sequences, because that's a lot of what we're seeing. The impact of cycles and sequences as the seasons change. And then we'll talk about what you'll find when you get out there. This is a great early spring quote. Charles Dickens. One of those March days when the sun shines hot and the wind blows cold, when it's summer in the light and winter in the shade. And of course, this is Dickens, who was probably in England when he wrote this, but it still applies to all of us northern latitudes. Even yesterday, I went out. I have my grandkids here for the week because it's vacation week from school, and yesterday we were out and the sun was shining, and then the wind started to blow, and my gosh, we were cold when we'd been quite comfortable a few minutes before. So and this is April, not even March. That's what spring is like when we're going through these change of seasons. And the reason we go through the change of seasons, right? I like to put this in here because I think we can't reiterate this too many times. It's a good thing to understand that the reason we have seasons, little alliteration there, is because of the tilt of the earth. It's not the distance from the sun. It's because the earth tilts at an axis of approximately 23.5 degrees. And during the equinox, September and spring, the tilt is parallel to the sun. So it doesn't make any difference in terms of the amount of sunlight we receive. The entire earth is receiving 12 hours of sunlight on March 20 whatever and September 20 whatever. But December and June, the tilt is either away for us or towards. And so it has a significant impact on the amount of sunlight we receive. And in the middle of December, on June 20, whatever, I say that because it shifts slightly, right? We're at our latitude here in Massachusetts, we're at about 9 hours of sunlight, whereas in June, we're at 15 hours and 15 minutes or so here at our latitude. And right now, we're a month past, we're a month past the solstice on our way to June, so we're a third of the way there. We are at about 13 hours plus. We're maybe, yeah, somewhere over 13 hours already. And that has a huge impact because it's all about energy. Different amounts of solar energy available on every day of the year is slightly different as we go around the sun. And right now we're increasing the amount of available energy from the sun. And that is what drives the whole engine here. Everything is dependent on that solar energy. That solar energy is utilized by plants for photosynthesis, but it is also the energy it's absorbed, it's radiated, it's what creates the energy in the air masses that are around us. All of that is all due to the amount of solar radiation that we're receiving. Now, so two things going on here. One is change in temperature, but two is photosynthesis. That solar energy is what's driving everything to leaf out and take advantage of the sunlight that's coming and photosynthesize. And photosynthesis, again, basis of the whole system, right? Without photosynthesis, we got nothing, because we can't trap that solar energy and turn it into bonds, molecular bonds, and keep it within a compound that can then be utilized by the plant that created, or utilized by the consumers, by those that eat the plant, or those that eat the organisms that eat the plants. Wherever you are on the food chain, you are dependent on that solar energy being converted into molecular energy. And so this morning I was out, and the leaf out that has occurred around here, still mostly non-native, but that's okay at this point, but things are just exploding with those hot days we had here in Massachusetts at the end of last week. Everything is opening up because it's time to photosynthesize. The other thing about photosynthesis is that it uses, excuse me, plants consume carbon dioxide when they're photosynthesizing, and it actually drops the carbon dioxide, sorry, pollen. So the amount of carbon dioxide in the northern hemisphere drops starting at the beginning of the growing season now, all the way through August. The level of carbon dioxide worldwide is lower because there's so many plants in the northern hemisphere photosynthesizing. That's amazing to me. Releasing oxygen also. They release oxygen and water, but that oxygen does make a difference, but it's not immeasurable. We don't measure the difference of it with our monitoring, but we can tell the difference with our beings. Okay, so let's move on from energy. So increased energy, and off we go. Now, what do we notice as spring progresses? And that is a lot of different things. The big things are, that trees and shrubs are leafing out, and that's all around us. All of these organisms that are cold-blooded or they're dependent on the environment around them, all of those have started to emerge. Amphibians and reptiles, insects, I should put insects in this little list, they are emerging. The temperatures are now high enough that they can be active. We do have a few reptiles that can be active in the middle of winter on a warmer day, but in general, most of our reptiles and amphibians, we really don't see much of them until spring has come. Migrating birds are a huge sign of spring for many of us, and they will come in waves. Different birds come at different times depending on their own specific species needs. So as the temperatures increase and the available energy increases, all of this is going on around us. And what happens because of that temperature increase and that available energy is that the patterns of everything around us start to shift. Our weather patterns will shift, where the winds are blowing will shift, where our weather comes from shifts, the pattern of migration, all of this stuff. Things that are flowering. There are a number of plants flowering right now. I noticed this morning when I was out with my granddaughter, and most of what I'm seeing for flowers right now are not native, except for the flowering trees. But you will keep an eye out. Just watch as things, get yourself outside as much as you can over the next few weeks, and you will be astonished at what is happening. Don't just wait for all the leaves to be out and say, whoa, look at that. And for the, get out there now, because watching the change in the patterns is just fascinating. The other thing that is cool about spring is that we notice the difference. We are, it's hard not to be human centric when you're a human, but we notice the difference in terms of what's going on around us and how we respond to it. I think most of us, we get a little lift on a warm, sunny day early in the spring. And part of that is just purely more sunlight, but also your body is responding to the changes in the environment around you. The claim that vitamin D, the studies show vitamin D improves your energy level, and we make vitamin D when we are exposed to sunlight. So, maybe we're producing a little more vitamin D in our system, and there you go. There's more fresh oxygen in the air around these new leaf photosynthesizing plants. And maybe that makes a little difference to us. Hard to know. The smell of a spring day is something most of us that have lived in any sort of northern latitude are aware of. That damp earth on a that moist damp earth, that's actually caused by the release of a compound that's made by bacteria in the soil, which some people think that's kind of yucky, but I think it's totally fascinating that we're responding to the aroma of a compound produced by bacteria in the soil, and that has such an impact on us. I mean, it's the connections around everything always there, right? So the more the bacteria are active, the more smell you will get. And we actually really like that smell. Most of us like that smell of that damp, earthy smell. We don't like the taste of it in general. I know people who don't like beets because they say they taste like earth. They taste like mud because beets have a fair amount of this compound in them, certainly in their peels. But there you go. Just a little human connection to spring, other than our connection to the world around us. Spring is also the time when we notice these cycles. Cycles are going on all the time. Environmental cycles, life cycles, all these cycles. But spring is the time when we take note of them. Spring and fall are the two biggies for us. In my mind, spring being really dramatic, although the colors of fall are very dramatic, but noticing the cycles, noticing what's happened, those buds beginning to open. The tree has been dormant all winter. And then as soon as the system shifts over, as soon as we get a little more sunlight and the temperatures begin to rise, then we get bud burst. And that bud burst drives drives the next 6 months. So bud burst, photosynthesis, high photosynthesis in the summer, and then the shutdown in the autumn. Seeds are mature, seeds are released. Leaves, deciduous leaves go dormant and are let go. Now the big thing about phenology is the study of all this stuff, right? That's right there on the screen. But the big thing about this is that climate change has a significant impact on many of these seasonal events, and is shifting when and how and where they happen. And so the big thing is to be aware of this, notice it, pay attention. And if you are a person who is inclined to make some kind of community science report, that data is great. There are lots of ways you can report data. A website, a program, an app called iNaturalist run by the California Academy of Science and National Geographic is a great one. There's also budburst.org, another place you can report things. But these seasonal things, if we can report these, if we can make note of them and let other people know, then this can be used as scientific data. The issue is, and we don't know enough about it, is what happens as these seasonal events shift and things become disconnected. the potential for things to become disconnected as they respond differently to those changes. Like, when do the buds open? When do the birds return? When do the flowers open? When do the insects hatch? You know, stuff like that. So that's our, because this is a constant season of change. Actually, we're always in change, but this season is the most noticeable in my mind. That constant season of every day when you go out, something else has happened. You'll notice something else is emerging or has moved on, or whatever it is. The flower has bloomed, and then the flower, the petals fall off, and then pretty soon you got a seed there, a fruit, whatever it is. But at any rate, early spring. And this is a stage we've passed here in Massachusetts. If you're far to the north, you may still have some snow around. But in general, here in New England, especially southern New England, we passed this stage back when we went through, back about the time of the solstice for us mostly, is when we'll still have some snow around, but we will see these emerging birds, these early birds of spring that we notice, because they stay all winter. Cardinals certainly do. And actually robins, despite the whole thing of the first robin of spring, many robins hang around quite a bit. They are not true migrators. But they start singing. Their songs change. And we notice the songs so much more as they are setting up their mating territories, their mating, getting themselves straightened out into who's going to pair up with whom, and where are we going to put our nest. The first flowering plant, native flowering plant, I will say, for us generally around here is something that most people don't pay a lot of attention to, but it's skunk cabbage. And so down I think part of it is it's got that whole skunk smell thing going, which really is not advantageous for most people, but they also grow in swamps. As humans, we don't tend to spend a lot of time in swamps, but skunk cabbage is actually a fascinating plant. This is oh, wait a minute, let me put on my laser pointer so maybe I'll be a little brighter and you can see it better. This is the flower, that funny looking spiky thing inside there. That's the flower of a skunk cabbage. And this is the protective cover around the skunk cabbage. It's called a spathe, if you like that vocabulary. But very similar to a jack-in-the-pulpit, which is another spring plant that we see a little bit later. The unique feature of skunk cabbage is that it's able to produce its own heat. You can see skunk cabbage flowers like this. You can see the spathe emerging up through snow as it will melt the snow around it. If there's snow there, you can see that difference. So that is a very cool thing to notice in early spring. And depending on the winter, like I noticed skunk cabbage starting to emerge as early as February around me. And then it settled, then it stopped sort of, it kind of held itself because it got cold again. And so then it slowed down, and then it reemerged and became much, much bigger, and then the leaves start to come out. So that's our early signs of spring. Change in birdsong to me, and these very first flowers. The change in the buds on trees is also another huge one for me, but I think I've got a slide about that later. The other big thing for spring, early spring, are vernal pools, and New England is full of vernal pools. And vernal pools are exactly what they sound like. The word vernal refers to spring in terms of its etymology, and a vernal pool is very active in the spring. It fills up in the spring. It may dry up completely. It may not. The biggest definition for a vernal pool is that it is not connected to another body of water. It does not have a permanent inlet or outlet. It is a temporary pool. It can be quite large and deep, or it can be quite small and shallow. But we have several amphibians that require vernal pools in order to reproduce. And they are unique to this ecosystem. And it's an ecosystem that's most noticeable right about now. March through June are the times when most of the activity is going on in vernal pools. We have our wood frog, and here's some wood frog eggs, these masses of little black dots inside. Those are eggs or newly hatching eggs. I think I'm seeing some polywogs up in here. and what are referred to as the mole salamanders, these salamanders that spend the vast majority of the year under the ground. They come out, both of these species, the yellow spotted salamander and the wood frog, will come down to the vernal pools from the uplands, and they will mate in the vernal pools, and then the adults go back to the upland. That's it. They come out, they go down, they mate, they go back up. So they're out for all of maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks. That's it. The rest of the time they're up in the woods, either underground, deep underground, or just barely under the leaf litter. You can find them on damp days, but it's a fascinating ecosystem, and they're just they were finding a yellow spotted salamanders was one of my happy days as a kid. I loved them. Now the cool part about this is, and we're going to do some sound files here, because this is a wood frog. It's got this little bandit mask on, these beautiful gold eyes, and this bandit mask. They're very small. At their biggest, they're maybe 2.5 to 3 inches long, but it's the sound that they make. Hold on. Quack, quack, quack. To me, wood frogs sound nothing more than like a bunch of quacking ducks. And if you are out walking around, like a month ago, even 2, 3 weeks ago, they've pretty much finished by now. The wood frogs come out so early that they've already mated, and the adults have gone back up into the upland forest. But you know, anytime from sort of mid-March on, depending on where you are, if you're farther north from us than up in New Hampshire, you probably may still be hearing wood frogs. But anytime you hear that odd quacking in the woods, you know there is a vernal pool near you. So that is a cool thing to notice, because you're like, oh, I didn't, there's a vernal, immediately, because that's the only place they can mate is in a vernal pool. And so if you hear wood frogs, it's a vernal pool. End of conversation, which is, it's a very cool little fact to have in your in your kit, because next spring, when you're out in March, and maybe and up through April in north of here, and you hear that quack, 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 quack. They quack, they croak, whatever we want to call it. They do that quite a bit. They'll especially do it in the evenings at dusk around that time, but also on any sort of overcast day. They won't be quacking a lot in bright sunlight, but other than that, you'll hear them quacking. And you've got a vernal pool. The other totally cool sound of spring is the spring peeper. Now this animal is tiny. It's probably 2 inches long at the most, and it's got this little cross on its back, this little X. It's actually part of its binomial name, and it makes the biggest sound. I'm sure all of us know this sound. You drive around in the evening on a spring evening, and you will hear the peepers. I just love the sound of peepers. They can be really annoying if you're trying to sleep, but they're beautiful otherwise. And notice the foot. Notice the pads on these toes. These are actually frogs that climb trees. These are tree frog. And so they have these sticky pads at the end of their toes. They have those long toes with those sticky pads. So these are two classic sounds of spring for me. When you don't even have to need know birds to know these two sounds, and they're really easy to find. And peepers will use. They don't require a vernal pool. I believe they can use them, but they don't require them. They actually need a longer metamorphic time frame, and if a vernal pool dries up too soon, the peepers are out of luck, whereas a wood frog can respond and just mature. They will metamorphose faster because of their adaptations. Okay, now on to the other early thing that we will notice as we go out and about are called spring ephemerals. This is a unique group of plants. These are our native spring ephemerals here in New England. And the trick with spring ephemerals is that they come out and they start very early. As soon as there's enough warmth and sunlight, they will emerge and flower The flowers will be pollinated by very early spring insects. We have native bees that are out already. And the seeds will be produced and mature. The whole thing happens in this very shortened time frame because they are taking advantage of that increased sunlight before the deciduous trees, leaf out. Okay, so they need to get in there, and they're down at the bottom, they're all the way down at the ground in a deciduous forest. And right now there's quite a bit of light on the ground. But in another month, that light will be pretty much gone. They will be in shade. This is a, hold on. Trout lily. This is a trout lily, sometimes called a dogtooth violet. I don't know why, because it has nothing to do with violets. But so I go with trout lily as a common name for this. And this emerges, flowers, goes to seed, dies away. By June, you wouldn't know it was there. It's gone. The leaves have turned brown, and the whole thing will just wait until next spring when it will emerge again and flower. Other ephemerals, this is a bloodroot which flowers and then it will leaf. It has a unique shaped leaf, and the leaf in the proper conditions, with a little shade and some moisture and some sun, a little dappled sun, those leaves will survive all season. But the flowers have come and gone by the end of May. Hepatica, another beautiful one up in the woods, more of a rich, moist, older, well-established deciduous forest. And then the one that many of us know, Jack in the Pulpit, will come up. It's a little bit later. Here's the Jack, that's the flower. Here's the Spath, the same as we had on our skunk cabbage. And then we have another set of spring ephemerals in the next slide. Again, a little bit later in the season. These will come out in May. So just starting. I've got some Mayapple in my yard, and I can just barely, I think because I kind of know where they are, picture them coming out of the ground right now. But they will grow. They have a flower that droops underneath a big umbrella-shaped leaf, and they will grow a fruit in May. It looks like an apple, thus the name Mayapple. I've heard that you can eat the Mayapples, but I am not inclined to try that because I've also heard they're poisonous. So, I tend to not go with things that might be poisonous and might be edible. No, thank you. Trillium, very sort of famous flower of the New England woods. Again, more in May. Different kinds of trillium have different flowers. They always have 3 petals. They also, this is a group of flowers that, because they flower at times of the year, they're the native insects that they are connected with in terms of their pollination interaction are generally flies. So they tend to smell bad. They tend to smell, several of them do not have a pleasant smell. They have quite an unpleasant smell because that attracts flies. The flies will smell them. And then the pink lady slipper, which is an orchid. It lives in drier, moist, drier, more acidic. They have a unique relationship with the soil they live in. You can't transplant lady slippers. You can't go dig them up and take them home and put them in your yard. They won't survive because of their unique relationship with the environment that they live in. These are totally cool flowers. They are crazy looking flowers. And the shape of the flower is all about getting that. They are pollinated by native bumblebees, our native common eastern bumblebee. And their shape is the bumblebee comes in the front end and then is stuck, kind of like a lobster trap. They can't get back out by going backwards. They have to walk forward. So they walk forward and they come out way back here at the back end through a little space. And in the process of doing that, they are picking up and depositing pollen every time they go in and out of a different flower. So it's the shape of the flowers is crazy beautiful, but it's totally functional. It's designed for a specific use, which is to get itself pollinated by a bumblebee. I just love that. I mean, really. But again, these are all going to come and go in the next 2 months. Not even 2 months. Where are we? We're mid-April. So by early June, these are long gone. they've already flowered and moved on to setting seed or completed the setting of seed, taking advantage of that early part of the season when the trees aren't leafed out. Here's a sort of a deeper story. This is Dutchman's breeches, which is named for these little upside down pantaloons, as we call them. And what the deal here is that the nectar, so this is a very early flowering spring ephemeral. The nectar is all the way, it's related to bleeding hearts. Nectar is all the way up here at the top of these little horns, the top of the end of the leg of the pantaloon, if we think of them that way, for our Dutchman's breeches. And they are pollinated by, this is a queen bumblebee. And just today I saw probably 4 or 5 queen bumblebees out. They've come out of their winter, their overwintering phase, and they're looking for a place to set up this season's nest. And they are very long-tongued bees, so they can reach all the way up into here to get the nectar. That's mostly what they're after. They also will pick up some pollen, but in the process of going after that nectar, they are pollinating these Dutchman's, these flowers on Dutchman's breeches. And so it's a relationship that evolved with both those species in the same place at the same time. Totally cool thing about many spring ephemerals, several of them at least, is that here's the seed. The bumblebee did its part of the story. The flowers were pollinated and the seed developed. This all happens very quickly, matter of a few weeks at the most. But with this seed, what it does is this white stuff out here on the right-hand side, that is called an elaiosome. It's like a little fatty, it's like a rich sort of fatty, sugary little snack. It's a treat for the bee, for the ant. The ants will come along, they will collect these seeds, which have this fatty, nutrient-rich elaiosome on the outside, and they will take the seed back to the anthill, and they will use that elaiosome, that fatty material, to feed their larvae. The seed doesn't need that fatty material. It's totally extraneous to the seed. It's only there to get the ant to take the seed and go and plant it and go and put it in their underground nest, where essentially it's been planted. It's brilliant. If you think about it, it is totally brilliant that this system has evolved, where the ant will plant the seed, the ant gets food out of it, the seed gets generally a great place to germinate, and the whole cycle then starts over. I love stories like that. That's a classic spring ephemeral connection story. Budburst, as I said earlier on, budburst is an early thing. Now, one of the things that I love, and for me right here where I am, this stage passed just the other day, and it went really fast because of that heat at the end of last week. These are red maple flowers. And you can tell the red maples early in the spring because you'll see this red haze. If you just look up at the top of a leafless tree, you'll start to see this red haze, and it'll get stronger. And those are the flowers. Now, they may not look much like flowers in our sense of flowers with lots of petals, because they are not insect pollinated. They are wind pollinated. They don't need petals. Whole nother story. We won't even get into that today because that'll get us completely off track. But what we have here is we have male maple flowers. Here are the pollen carrying the anthers out here on the end of the stamen. And then we have female maple flowers. And you'll notice this little sort of curved V out here. Think of a maple, think of the little double set of seeds with their wings on them. And they will develop out of these two pistils. Each of these will develop 2 seeds for that classic. Right here this morning, I noticed these have already gone to the seeds. These have already gone to seed. And last week I was seeing flowers more fully developed than these. And this week I've already got seeds. So it's a very fast transition, especially when the temperatures go up the way they did last week. And so budburst is just a totally cool thing. Elm trees have gorgeous flowers. They're beautiful. Ash trees, also beautiful flowers. And all of this is happening right this minute, at least for my latitude. Now, the other thing that's connected with this process is that and this is what I was referring to back with the phenology slide, is that these things are connected. As these buds open, and different trees, the buds will open at different times. The oak buds have not opened yet. They have not gotten there at all, whereas the maple buds are completely open and moving on to seeds and soon leaves. Maybe some but at any rate, oaks are behind. But the thing is that as those buds open, that's where the caterpillars are. As our migrating warblers and other species come back and set up and need those insects, they need that protein, fat rich source of food. Trees and the birds need to be happening at the same time. When the chickadee sets up their nest, when a pair of chickadees sets up their nest, they need somewhere from 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to fledge that nest. You know, if they get too disconnected, then the trick with the buds is that the caterpillars are all right there. They're easy to find. There's lots of them in one place. If the harder the chickadees have to work to collect the caterpillars that they need, the less likely successful nesting moment. So this is something to consider as we move through the shifting patterns of climate change and what will happen to them. Trees also have lots of important aspects. And as we said, you know, the CO2 levels of the entire Earth drop because of the photosynthesis of the northern forests. Amazing, actually. Okay, now I was about to pause for a question, but I realized I'm not because I'm in a webinar. Okay, now the other thing that's happening, we've got emerging insects. Again, dependent on the amount of sunlight and the amount of warmth. But here is a native bee on one of our trout lilies. So it is collecting pollen from this trout lily, and in the process, it is pollinating the trout lily. And here is probably the same species of bee. I'm not sure. This might be an adrena. There's two basic groups: the mining bees and the cellophane bees that you'll see really early in the season. Not very big, but very distinctive. They stay low to the ground. Both species, both groups. I'm sorry, both families. They'll stay low to the ground and fly around and you'll see them in holes. They dig holes in the ground to make their nests. This is a cellophane bee. This one I can't see very well, but the face actually looks different now that I said I thought they were the same. This face looks different than this face. This is a spring azure, very beautiful, tiny little butterfly that comes out quite early. And this is the earliest butterfly we're likely to see in New England. This is a mourning cloak, M-O-U-R. And this is because they overwinter as adults. Most of our butterflies do not, but these overwinter as an adult, so they can emerge very early. You'll see them in March, flying about in the woods. And again, taking advantage of that sunlight that's coming through to the ground before the trees leaf out. And then, oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about in spring. Here we go. Bird migration. I think we're all pretty aware of bird migration. But so birds are migrating up from all the way, some of them all the way down here, well down in South America, all the way up into the tundra. Many of them will pass through here. Some of them will stay here. And they are driven by the need for food, the space for nesting and the need for food to successfully complete that nest. These are ruddy turnstones, and this is a red-winged blackbird. But so they are headed for many of them are headed for the boreal forest or the taiga, which is that area between the forest and the tundra. Most of the shorebirds are headed all the way up into the tundra. These are shorebirds. Most of those will go all the way far to the north. And the songbirds have started. The shorebirds are sort of started, but the songbirds have really started. We now have songbirds that have come up. A lot of them are northern South America and Central America, even the southern US, and they will fly up and some of them will stay with us, and some of them will move a little farther north into the boreal forest. But then the shorebirds, some of which come from all the way down at the tip of South America, will fly through. And again, most of them are coming through. Some of them nest here. Piping plover is a classic example of a nesting shorebird that we are attentive to, because we have to protect it from human and other animal interactions on our beaches. But the vast majority of our shorebirds continue on up into the tundra. Lots of space and lots of insect activity. You know, when humans go to the tundra, they complain about the mosquitoes, but for the birds, that is a tremendously important food source. So all of that. And the other thing that, don't forget, changes in weather patterns. Favorable travel conditions essentially means the winds are going in the right direction. They're not fighting the prevailing wind to go north. And so they will move on those days when the winds are most favorable. Just so you will hear lots of different bird song around you, and you will hear them for a few weeks and then they will go away. They go away for two reasons. One is they may move on. Two is that those that have nested, once they've nested and produced young, they generally stop singing. They don't sing a lot once they've got eggs laid and young to feed. They're busy finding food. And they no longer need to sing to establish a territory or find a mate. They will do a little singing, maybe dawn or late in the day, but in general, it gets much quieter by the end of May or mid-June. So just to give you a show of some of these beautiful migrants that come through here, and some will stay, as I said, but most are traveling through. They're coming from Central and South America for the large part. These are some of the warblers. They have beautiful songs, which is why they're called warblers. They are also fantastically beautiful. They're quite small. The largest of them is no more than a few inches long, and the smallest of them is tiny. So this is a magnolia warbler. This is a Blackburnian, chestnut-sided. My son and his family live up in southern Maine, and I hear chestnut-sideds at their house all the time. So they have nesting chestnut-sideds. I do not, but and this is a black and white. And so these are just 4 out of a potential 25, 30 species of warblers that we might possibly see in and around our woods over the next few weeks. If you are a birder, May is the time when everybody's like, oh, we got to go out, we got to go out, we got to go out, because this is when the warblers are coming through. Lots of song, as I said, hard to remember how to remember them, but they're out there. Some more. Now, the thing that will happen, so this group for Eastern Massachusetts, these 4 species are moving. They're stopping. They're stopping to feed and rest up and get some more energy before they continue on their migratory pattern a little bit, some just a little bit farther and some a good deal farther north. But in general, they are not nesting in Massachusetts, whereas these guys will nest in Massachusetts. This is a black-throated green, and these are both yellow warblers. And you will hear them singing for a good deal longer because they are setting up territories and doing their nesting. Singing is a hugely important part of nesting. Oh, we're doing okay. So that you will hear lots of singing early in the day. You will hear counter singing as 2 males might be singing against each other, trying to establish, or you will hear sometimes in some species, both males and females sing, and in others, it's just the males. But then once they've established that territory, then they set up housekeeping. They build a nest and they start laying eggs. So here we have a nesting pair of yellow warblers, and they will still be singing a little bit in the morning, but they definitely have shifted their focus. This is a cool bird because they tend to nest low in shrubbery, in shrubby areas around the edges between a field and a wooded area. So they're a fun bird to get to know a little bit. If you see a bright yellow, very yellow bird around a shrubby edge, you might in fact have some nesting yellow warblers. And then, so we've set up housekeeping, and then often by now, you know, certainly by May, we will have some nests and some babies to feed. And that takes a huge amount of energy to do that. We've got to feed those babies constantly. Here, this is these are eastern bluebirds. This is a bluebird egg that hasn't hatched down here, so one of them didn't hatch. Well, or maybe it will, but we don't know. But you'll notice it looks a lot like a robin. Robin's egg blue, you know, that same sort of bright kind of turquoisey blue color. They are quite closely related. This even looks young eastern bluebirds and young American robins look very much alike. That's where you see that genetic connection. But here's this parent just feeding this animal that is now probably weighs more than it does. And you can see it's just coming into its adult plumage. It's got a little bit of blue back here on its wings, but it's not ready to fly yet. But that's, so, you know, that's a lot. Remember, all of this energy that we've got to take advantage of and we've got to use when it's available. Oh, this is a great story. This is a Carolina wren. This is a bird that 30 years ago we hardly ever heard, and now it is everywhere. It is all around us. We will play the song, and it's in typical wren fashion. It's a tiny bird with a huge voice. Often sits with a cocked tail, got that little stripe over the eye. And look, here it is nesting in a pair of shoes that were left out on the back porch, and here it is nesting in a bucket under a hose. Yeah, they will nest anywhere. And for me, I find it fascinating because it's probably the bird I hear most in the middle of the winter around my house. Very loud, very distinct sound. It'll do this, and then it also has a faster version. So. But this is a bird that if you pay any attention, you will hear these around you. And this is a bird that, it's like cardinals. Before the 50s, we didn't have cardinals. You know, before 1990, we didn't have Carolina wrens. So, you know, birds are constantly shifting. Some of it may be because of climate change. Some of it may be just expanding their territories. But this is an interesting story in terms of nothing is ever static in the world around us. And this is a spring story, nesting Carolina wrens. Mammals. So for mammals, this is a time of, they have given birth and it's time to feed these kids. It's time to feed the kids. You know, you always got to feed the kids. But this is not this. So this is not a time of it's not like birds who will reproduce, or amphibians who are reproducing and producing eggs, and those eggs are hatching. These animals all the mating took place last fall or last summer even, and so we had the pregnant does and sows and whatever over the winter, and the young are emerging now, and now they've got to feed them, and that's it. You got to raise them and you got to feed them. This is eastern coyote. Eastern coyotes are fascinating animals. They are historically, coyotes were out west, and they themselves, not moved by humans, but coyotes migrated across the continent. And in so doing, they went up north. Most likely is that they went north and stayed in the forests. They went sort of north of the Great Plains. They didn't go through the Great Plains because not the right habitat for them. And in the process of going north and across the continent, they hybridized a little bit. They mated with wolves, gray wolves. At this point, all of the DNA that has been tested out of eastern coyotes, there was a big study in New York and another good sized study on the Cape, on Cape Cod. They all have some wolf DNA in them. And so our eastern coyotes are bigger and slightly different than western coyotes. People often think they've mated with dogs. That is not true. Coyote dog hybrids they might occur, but they are not viable in terms of reproducing and carrying on for themselves. But coyote wolf hybrids apparently were. And so our eastern coyotes exhibit some wolf DNA. And you'll see this is a good sized set of pups here. And they will, she will work hard to keep them fed. So not a great thing to have around suburban areas, but not uncommon at this point. But they will take dogs and cats that are all left unguarded. Herbivores, but very prominent, and omnivores will eat anything they can get their little hands on. Actually, carnivores, canines are mostly omnivorous too, but she's looking for good protein sources for that batch. But all of these are animals that we are seeing more and more frequently in more densely populated suburban areas. So it becomes an issue of what's happening around us and how can we interact with them. But that, again, whole different topic for a different day. But so just to get back to spring, to get back to the concept of paying attention and what's going on around you, the nature of spring, go out and look. You know, if you need a magnifier to look at things up close, because you've gotten a little too farsighted as life goes on, then carry a magnifier. There are lots of good little magnifiers or loops that you can keep in your pocket, and just let yourself stop and pay attention to some of this stuff that you might walk right by when you're out and about. There's just all kinds of things going on right now that if you're not attentive, they will have already moved into some other category by the time you come back in another 2 weeks. Once you start looking, you will see more and more. I have a friend he became a very active birder, in his 50s, and he was like, it's amazing how many more birds there are out there now than there were before. So, if you look, you'll see something. And the more you look, the more you'll see. And then, just to watch the patterns of flowers, watch what's going on around you, is totally cool. And then notice the cyclic nature, notice this seasonal phenomena, notice what's happening in terms of the interactions of various and sundry things. Notice if you've got some foxes that are living near you, how are they changing? When are the kits out? What do you notice about the kits early in the season? Right now, for instance, if you see fox kits, they will look a lot like those coyote pups that we in the couple slides back, because they're very sort of sandy brownish gray. They don't turn red until they get a little bit older. And are out and about a whole lot more. Notice what the birds are collecting for their nest. If you've got nests around you that you can watch, I've had a Baltimore Oriole nest for 2 or 3 years. I noticed it during the immediate shutdown in 2020, and I became so enamored of it. And I spent every single day I went out just to watch that nest. At least for some part of the day. And last year, I noticed the male was back, but I didn't see a female. So now I don't know. And then I got really worried, and I don't know what happened, and I wasn't around as much. So I'm very concerned about them. But just get yourself connected to something that's going on. Here again, native bee, very different than honeybees. Honeybees are not native. Those are the bees everybody thinks of when they think of bees, and they are not native. Nothing wrong with them, but what we have around us is this huge variety of native bees, and that they shift over the seasons. If you have flowers in your garden, go out and look at them. They are not dangerous. They can sting, but they hardly ever do. There you go. Times of day, huge. Go out at different times of day. Go out in the morning, go out at night, go out in the middle of the day. You'll see completely different things going on depending on the time of day that you're out there. So, that's an easy one. This, for some reason, this is the introduced lady beetle. It's not a native ladybug, but for some reason, this is our state insect. I don't know why. We do have native ladybugs, but this is the ladybug that was brought and intentionally introduced to be used in like in greenhouses and stuff like that, because it's really good at eating insects that are pests. So, but that's something that you'll see coming up soon, not quite yet. Gray tree frogs. I swear I heard a gray tree frog the other day. It was very early for it, but we'll be hearing gray tree frogs soon. Sorry, I don't have a sound file on them. Go to different places. Go to different kinds of places. There are tremendous, especially here in Massachusetts and New England in general, we have lots of preserved places. If you are somebody who lives in different places while, during the course of the year, then pay attention to what's happening in one place that you live in, and then how it's different when you get to your other place, and go for some specificity, not just, oh, look at the trees are different, or oh, look at the green is different, or look at, it's a lot cooler here or hotter there or whatever. Try, challenge yourself to notice something distinct. Lots of different places. Mount Auburn Cemetery in the spring is an absolutely stunning place to visit. I know it sounds crazy, but it is it's a migrant trap is what it's referred to in birding terminology. The birds that fly in because of the location of Mount Auburn and probably the number of flowering trees and things like that they have, lots of migrants come through Mount Auburn. So it's a terrific place to go in the early to mid part of May. Now, the other thing let me back up 1 second. As much as going to different places, the other option, which is equally valid, I think, in terms of how you interact with the world, is to look at one place, to really explore one place near you or in your yard or whatever attracts you to it. Just, you can focus on what's going on day by day, week by week in that place that you know well. It doesn't always have to be a new place. Whatever it is, just get out there and enjoy yourself. In the process of enjoying yourself, do not try to catch animals. Do not pick wildflowers. Avoid collecting. Many of us, we have this, oh, wouldn't that be, I mentioned my grandkids several times because they're here with me, but it's, that childlike thing, oh, that's cool. Can I take that home? Can I take that home? Can I take that home? If something is not connected at both ends, that's kind of my basic rule. If you're picking something off the shrub or off the tree, avoid that. But if it's already fallen off, go ahead, take it home. If you're not getting in the midst of somebody's dinner or whatever is happening, just try to minimize your impact on the world around you as you're out there. This to me is a pretty obvious one. Don't impinge on somebody else's private property. Or get in somebody else's way. But this one is one that's these two down here that we'd often don't acknowledge when we're out and about and we see other people. If you've seen something and you noticed it and you thought it was totally cool, even if you don't know what it is, and somebody else walks by, you say, did you see that? Is that totally cool? That just changes their interaction with the world, changes your interaction with the world, and changes the interaction of the two humans. It's a cool thing to do. And that if you are being exemplary in your behavior, you can help spread that exemplary kind of behavior by interacting with the wildlife appropriately and sharing it with the people around you. That's a very, it's a very optimistic attitude, I know, but it works most of the time. Sometimes it doesn't. And, you can take that in, be safe, but don't be worried about people. Don't be worried about interacting when you're out in the wild. And just do it in a manner that makes sense. Issues of spring, as we've talked about on the way through, is what's happening. Climate change, shift in cycles, shift in seasonal relationships, loss of habitat or decline in habitat quality. Is the habitat producing what the organisms need? These are all things that are ongoing, and how can we do that? We can be engaged in terms of our own behavior and helping to make things better for the world around us. And there's lots of different ways to do that. I'm not even going to try to list them here, but to think of yourself as a supporter of the environment. We are environmental beings. We live in the environment. It's not separate from us. We are part of it. So a little synopsis of all that. And then questions. I managed to make it in just about an hour, and I'm happy to stay on for 10, 15 minutes and do questions. I will stop sharing my video. Here, my screen.
So Tia, wonderful job as usual. And yes, let's take 12 minutes of questions. We'll go to
12 minutes of questions. Okay.
Very, very precise. Rita would like to know what insect pollinates the skunk cabbage?
Skunk cabbage, that's a great question, Rita, because that has been a question for some time in terms of, and it's probably some kind of early flies.
Is skunk cabbage edible?
I believe that parts of skunk cabbage are edible. I believe the roots are edible, but again, like many of these plants, they have components or compounds in them that are not necessarily good for you. So if you're going to prepare them, you have to do it. You have to find some very reliable resources and follow the recommendations.
Nancy notes that she's never seen skunk cabbage and she's lived here all her life and she lives right near wetlands.
Well, go back to the wetlands and get to the densest, dankest part of the wetland. Really dense soil, really it's high, very low oxygen. They will grow in places that nothing else will grow. So soils that are almost always saturated, that's where you'll find skunk cabbage.
Laura asks, are bleeding hearts native and are they beneficial to pollinators?
We have both native and non-native bleeding hearts in our part of the world. And the true native bleeding heart, I believe, is probably a bit more southern than New England based. So most of the bleeding hearts that we see around us in people's gardens are not specifically New England native. Are they beneficial? Yeah, in the form that they produce nectar, and most of our native insects would probably use bleeding hearts. That would use, the Dutchman's breeches. They would use a bleeding heart too.
April asks, is there a particular date by which most birds stop building their nests?
Oh no, it depends on the species. We have at this latitude, a lot of birds will only nest once, but a lot of birds will nest twice. And so like bluebirds will often nest twice. And so the question of building their nests, they will nest, they will raise a batch, that batch will fledge and they will start over. They won't necessarily rebuild the nest, but they will start over and have another batch. So totally
Larry,
species dependent.
Species dependent, got it. Larry would like to know, can you cut azalea branches that look dead? And if so, what time of the year? And Larry lives in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, Larry, you're in a climate that I know absolutely nothing about. I don't know when. Yes, you can trim azaleas. Absolutely, you can trim anything. The time of year to trim an azalea in South Carolina, I don't want to touch that one, Larry, because I don't want to lead you astray. I highly recommend go find yourself a local nursery that you feel you can talk to somebody who's going to listen to you and you have faith in. And I would work with them, because I really don't know when you should trim azaleas in South Carolina. They should be dormant. Much better to trim when things are dormant than when they're actively growing.
Mindy says, can you talk about the changes you have noticed related to climate change? I have noticed soils being so much dustier, drier, with less water holding abilities. What changes have you noticed?
We'd have to spend another hour on that one, Mindy, but yes, I agree that one of the issues in New England is that historically we have received essentially about the same amount of precipitation any month of the year as snow in the winter, as rain in the summer, but the total amount per month is pretty consistent, and not a huge amount, and that has shifted. When we have storms, we get a huge amount of water, and then we have long periods with nothing. So the dries are drier and the wets are wetter. And whether that water is coming as snow or rain is very important in terms of the amount of moisture that remains in the ground. That is a very observable impact of climate change. The snow cover, enormous.
Mindy would also like to know, do many frogs all come out in spring at the same time? I once heard a magnificent symphony of sounds, all varied, early in the spring by a pond.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what you probably had several different species going on. Because wood frogs and peepers will certainly overlap, and some of the other frogs. Our other frogs are not vernal pool related. They need a permanent body of water that doesn't dry up, and so they. But I heard American toads the other day, which to me is very early. I heard American toads and peepers at the same time.
And we're having a talk with the Mass Audubon on Thursday, May 18th at 2 o'clock. You can learn all about frogs. And I put that information in the chat just now. That's 4 weeks from today. Let's see, Chrissy asks, is there a native plant that I can plant in complete shade to help birds or pollinators? And she notes that she lives in an apartment and doesn't have a full yard. So a plant in the complete shade to help birds and pollinators. Yeah,
complete shade is hard. And mostly, what you're looking at in terms of helping habitat is you want diversity. You want to aim for a variety of plants. And so, maybe some spring ephemerals, if you're near or can get to Native Plant Trust. There's a Native Plant Trust nursery out in Nasami, out in the western part of the state. Otherwise, there's one in their main garden is in Framingham. And if you're near either the Hadley, I think it is, Nasami Farm is, but look up Native Plant Trust, and I highly recommend them in terms of they have good shade growing plants available for native plants. But the other thing is, for your pollinators, do not overlook some annuals. Some annuals are good and some are not so helpful. But again, look at Grow Native Massachusetts is another good resource if you want to look at some good recommendations for things to plant. Mass Audubon has some good pages on things to plant. Full shade is hard. I'll grant you that.
Carol asks, you showed male and female red maple seeds. Is each red maple tree either male or female?
In general, they can have both on the tree. They can have both male and female flowers, theoretically. But I think predominantly, yes, you will have male trees and female trees. But not always. And in red maples, not all maples are the same.
Interesting. So Joyce asks, will birds return to a nest that they built from last year?
Okay, so the simple answer is no, in that the vast majority of birds will not reuse a nest. They may return to the same tree. They will often return. The parents, these orioles that I've been watching for 3 years, that except maybe now we've lost our female, but they will return to the same area, but they will almost, very few will use the same nest. Phoebes are one that will use the same nest. They will add on to it. You'll end up with this pile of nests with eastern phoebes. But most birds, you will get the same birds back. If you had a nesting, if you had a nest of chickadees or whatever, they will come back, but they will build a new nest.
All right, we're going to start to wind down here. Jean asks, can you talk about pesticide, mosquito spray, and insect decline? Non-targeted, broad-based chemical drifts.
Don't even get me started. I tell you,
We've only got 3 minutes, Tia.
nothing drives me crazier than prophylactic mosquito and tick spraying, because it's as you say, it is broad-based. It will kill anything in the certain life stage. It's aimed at a life stage, not a species. And so almost all chemical sprays, whatever they're aimed at, they are aimed at a life stage. So they will kill all insects or a broad base of insects in that life stage. So when they say it's targeted, that's a misnomer. And I am strongly opposed to any use of chemical pesticides. I mean, I'm probably not supposed to be that adamant as I am representing Mass Audubon, but I do not, chemical pesticides are not beneficial because you will kill off the beneficial insects, which are the only thing that are holding the pestilential. You know, most insects are beneficial. Some, a very few are problematic.
An anonymous attendee asks about praying mantis. I have found 5 egg sacs this spring so far, but I think they are the bad kind. Should I get rid of them, destroy them? I've heard they eat the native ones.
Okay, so most of the mantids that we see in New England are introduced. They are not native. We don't have a lot of mantids that are native that we see large numbers of in New England, no matter what. But introduced mantids, while I don't promote them, I wouldn't say they're detrimental. They are indiscriminate eaters. That's true of any beneficial insects, or most beneficial insects, is that they are controlling the population of detrimental insects, but they are not going to, you know, they're not going to bypass a, you know, they're not going to bypass a butterfly caterpillar just because we like butterflies, if you understand what I'm saying. And mantids don't target other mantids. They target anything they can eat. And they were brought here because they are such efficient predators. If you've got a lot of them and you feel that there are too many and you're sure they're Asian, then if you want to wipe some out, you just have to mash them. I wouldn't spray them. Again, avoid sprays of any kind. Unless, I mean, yeah, but the only thing that I think is marginally, well, never mind. But so I would let them be. I wouldn't encourage them, but I would let them be.
Laura, well, so many questions, so little time. Let's do 1 or 2 more. So first of all, somebody asked some questions about frogs and where they mate, when they mate, do they make mating sounds? I'm going to say, come to the talk in 4 weeks, okay? We'll talk all about frogs then. Lauren would like to know, what can we safely use on our property for ticks? I live in a rural area and have 2 active dogs that I check carefully, but they can bring ticks to my family.
Yep, there you go. There is nothing you can safely do to control ticks. What the best thing that you can do to control ticks is to keep them off of you. And so, you know, use a tick collar, use a tick and flea collar on your pets, and check them carefully. And then check yourselves carefully. I mean, tick checks are about the only. There is there's stuff you can use on your clothing. Picaridin is one that is not harmful and you can use on your clothing and is quite effective. DEET, DEET is very effective. I tend not to want to spray DEET on myself, but that's just my preference. But there are definitely tick repellents that you can use. There's really, in terms of tick control, there really isn't anything that I know of.
Carol wants to know, will a bird use a nest left behind by another bird?
Raptors will do that. Like owls will use a great horned owl. We use like great horned owls will use a great blue heron nest. But among anything smaller than, I mean, so that up in that raptor category where they have to have a large nest and it takes a long time and it's difficult to build, they will reuse nests. Songbirds, no, not so much.
Let's end where we started. You've really fascinated people with skunk cabbage. Okay, Joy would like to know, are skunk cabbage and Jack in the pulpit, are they similar? Are they in the same family? You know what Jack in the pulpit is? I'm not even sure what that is.
I do know what Jack in the pulpit is, and yes, they are related, not really closely related, but they are related. So yes, that was a good pickup on that one because they both have those space.
All right, so we answered all the questions in the Q&A. There are additional questions in the chat, but we simply just don't have time for them. So I do apologize, but we did get to the vast majority of the questions. So folks, let's give Tia another big virtual round of applause. She did a wonderful job and was very generous with her time. Tia, do you have any last words for the audience?
No, just get out and pay attention. Just get out and enjoy the world and see what you notice. And if you're inclined to be a community scientist, then go online and look up some ways that you can contribute your sightings, what you notice.
Excellent. Well, everyone enjoyed this spring day. I'm not sure where everyone is, but it's 65 or so here in Tewksbury, so we'll take it. And yeah, happy spring, everyone. Thanks so much, Tia. I'm sure we'll
Thank
see
you,
you down
Robert.
the road.
Right.
Have a good one.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.